Evet efendim, kaynak ve finansman elbette bu trilyonlarca dolar büyüklüğündeki proje için çok önemli, çok değerli. Aynı zamanda burada kullanılacak olan metodolojinin ne olacağı, hangi para birimlerinin ne şekilde değerlendirileceği de benzer şekilde ön plana çıkacak temel faktörlerden bir tanesi olmayı sürdürecek. Dolayısıyla bizim de ikinci oturumumuz bu kapsamda bankacılık, finans ve sigorta başlığını taşıyor. Altyapı projelerinin finansmanı, yerel parayla ticaret, renminbi kullanımı, finansal etkilerin gözetimi başlıklarındaki sorulara yanıt aramak üzere programımızın moderatörü Sabancı Holding CFO'su Sayın Barış Oran olacak. Kendisini sahneye davet edelim. Aynı zamanda programımızın diğer panelistleri ise Hong Kong Ticareti Geliştirme Konseyi Avrupa Bölge Direktörü William Chui, Türkiye İş Bankası Kurumsal ve Ticari Bankacılık Genel Müdür Yardımcısı Mehmet Şencan, Euler Hermes Makroekonomi Başkanı Alexis Garati, Garanti Bankası Proje Satın Alma Finansmanı ve Sürdürülebilirlik Direktörü Sayın Emre Hatem, Natixis Türkiye Kıdemli Ülke Müdürü ve Çin-Türk Araştırmaları Merkezi Başkanı Doktor Rıza Kadılar olacak. Herkesi sahneye davet ediyoruz tekrar.
Evet, teşekkür ederim. I'm joined by distinguished guests today and to discuss how the financial institutions will facilitate the Belt and Road Initiative, specifically the cooperation opportunities, as well as the use of renminbi, I hope the use of lira one day as well, and trade, infrastructure, financing, and not least the use of technology in funding the efforts. As you know, Turkey is as we all appreciate, Turkey is a great place to invest as a gateway to large markets. It has been a major destination of the Silk Road historically, and China has sizable capital surplus. I hope the Belt and Road Initiative will facilitate this effort and combine the countries together in a more successful and prosperous future. Let me briefly introduce our guest speakers today. Mr. William Chui, the Regional Director of Hong Kong Trade Development Council. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Mahmut Şencan is the Deputy Chief Executive of İşbank in charge of corporate and commercial banking. Welcome. Mr. Alexis Garati is the Head of Macroeconomics in Euler Hermes. They have been very active in facilitating trade in this part of the world. Thank you for joining us. Emre Hatem is the Project Finance Director of Garanti Bank, very active in a number of projects within Turkey. Welcome. And Ji Peng is the Secretary General of Zhangguanjun M&A Promotion Association and EVP of Xingao Asset Management, combining both technology and finance. Thank you for staying with us. You have been very popular today, looks like. Okay, let me get started. As we talk in finance and funding, it's a very hot topic these days across this part of the world. Let me start with Mr. William Chui. What's the role of regional trade agencies in this financial integration in Belt and Road Initiative?
Thank you. And before I answer your questions, perhaps I should say thank you to the organizers for inviting me to speak at this seminar. Yesterday, we heard a lot about the China-Turkey relationship, how the two countries can work more closely in helping the business communities of the two countries seize opportunities arising from the Belt and Road Initiative. And I would like to introduce a very important element in this equation. And this important element is, of course, Hong Kong. How Hong Kong can facilitate the cooperation. As we all know, Hong Kong is a special administrative region of China. And under the one country, two system concept, Hong Kong maintains its own capitalistic system, and we have our own customs, and we have our own currency, and the most important of all, we practice common law. So if I may offer to the participants in this room three keywords One is internationality. The second word is diversity, and the third word is connectivity. Let me explain one by one. First, internationality. Hong Kong is, I would say, a very important international commercial hub in Asia. In Hong Kong, we are now the host of over 8,200 overseas and Chinese mainland companies. And they are in various sectors. Quite a number of them, they are service providers. They are engaged in business like construction, surveying, architectural services, engineering, urban planning, which are all important, as we all know, to the Belt and Road Initiative. Actually, for the success of the Belt and Road Initiative projects, you need not only contractors and engineers, you also need other professions like lawyers for drafting contracts, accountants for due diligence, and of course, bankers for project financing. And Hong Kong has a high concentration of these important people. And this is, of course, what we refer as a diversity. And if, touch wood, dispute arise, that the mediation and arbitration services that Hong Kong provide can also offer a very cost-effective way of settling disputes. And I'm glad that our two speakers at the previous sessions, they also mentioned the role of Hong Kong in this particular field. And of course, I think the pressing from the central government is also important because, again, as we all know, China is still very much a planet economy. And just last year, the National Reform and Development Commission, which is a very influential government agency, because all the major economic policy are drafted and executed by this particular agency, signed an arrangement with Hong Kong, which focuses on three particular areas. One is, of course, finance, and the second one is the development of professional services in the BNI initiative, and the third one is maritime service of Hong Kong, which is also important. And it also emphasized the role of Hong Kong in finance as the world's largest offshore renminbi settlement center. And the last but not the least is the encouragement of more Chinese mainland and foreign companies to make use of Hong Kong as their regional headquarters. And I think all these adding up together best illustrates the special role of Hong Kong in this Belt and Road Initiative.
Thank you. Definitely there is a need for putting these countries together and facilitating the effort. And Hong Kong as a gateway of China to the rest of the world will definitely assist the effort. Mehmet Bey, as far as the infrastructure is concerned, we have high expectations in Turkey. We had high infrastructure spending in Turkey for some time. And what do we expect from Belt and Road Initiative? And how do we capture the full potential of Belt and Road Initiative funding to improve even further the infrastructure of this country?
It's Mehmet Şencan. I am Deputy CEO of İş Bank. I would like to mention about my bank relations with China and BRICA generally at first. Dear esteemed guests and distinguished colleagues, it's a great honor and pleasure for me to be invited to participate in this session. I greet and welcome you all. İş Bank, which is one of the long-established banks in Turkey, had been founded with the mission of supporting Turkish economy, industry, and trade. Since its inception, it has participated in many companies, not only in finance industry, but also manufacturing and service industries. We are proud of the fact that we had assumed a pioneering role in many businesses we entered into. As we have been executing our strategy in line with our mission, we have not confined ourselves only to Turkey. We had taken initiatives which we deemed appropriate for both Turkish economy and the businesses of our customers. In fact, overseas banking operations of our bank date back to 1932, the year in which we opened first overseas branches of ours, one in Hamburg, Germany, the other one in Alexandria, Egypt. As far as our cross-border operations are concerned, we currently operate in a total of 13 foreign countries through 3 subsidiary banks, 22 branches, and 2 representative offices, one of which is situated in China. China has undoubtedly become a hub country with ever-increasing importance for the globe, especially in the manufacturing industry, thanks to its giant production capacity, high-end technological capability, as well as deeply rooted culture and healthy demographics. The Chinese GDP, which accounted for around 25%, 30% of the global economy in 15th and 16th centuries, had hovered below 10% in the 20th century before it climbed back to 19% today. It is believed that Chinese economy will further continue to gain ground in the foreseeable future, and the historical levels will be reached again. Seizing this momentum coming up, we are one of the institutions which opened a representative office in China as early as 2006. Since then, we try to foster the mutual business between our countries firsthand and support all organizations and events which are aligned with it. Lastly, early this year, we enjoyed an opportunity to visit China and meet some of the leading corporations and institutions, both private and governmental, as a delegation including myself, headed by our CEO, Mr. Adnan Bali. In this respect, I kindly thank TÜSİAD for hosting this valuable conference and would especially like to highlight that as Turkish Bank, we are highly proud of supporting such a great organization. In our opinion, BRICA is an overarching vision going beyond developing mutual business between Turkey and China and should be considered as an holistic and multifaceted initiative. In this regard, we believe that activities of finance industries play a key role and sets the stage for other trade and business relationship to exist. For BRICA to exploit to full potential, we thus attach a great importance and key role to finance industry. From the perspective of China, Turkey, lying at the crossroads as well as the boundary to Europe, possesses a highly strategic location. In our country, there are more than 60,000 foreign-owned companies, approximately 1,000 of which have been founded with Chinese capital. Among those, there are world-class banks such as ICBC Bank and Bank of China, Kumport, and the high-speed railway between Ankara and Istanbul come to the fore. In addition to these, I especially would like to mention Huawei, which has set up its second biggest R&D center outside of China in Istanbul. Power China Group, which manages 63 countries from its regional office in Istanbul, as well as China Tianshan Engineering Corporation, which builds the country's largest soda ash production complex in Ankara and a natural gas depository under Lake Tuz in central Anatolia. The dynamism we see on the foreign direct investment front is also reflected on the foreign trade side. According to the data compiled by Turkish Statistical Office, our mutual trade business volume increased to $26.3 billion as of end of 2017, indicating a threefold increase in dollar terms compared to the volume in 2006. A remarkable portion of this volume is directly mediated by our bank. We shape our China strategy in a dynamic manner. Recently, we have been introducing some innovations, both in terms of products and services. The first one had been RMB forwards. We created this product, which is at the disposal of our customers since the end of 2016, especially for the customers who engage in foreign trade business with China. Another heading I would like to mention is the agreements we signed. In an effort to foster cooperation between our countries, we signed various agreements with Chinese financial institutions. In addition to some others, we signed a bilateral credit agreement of $250 million with ICBC. Another agreement had been a buyer credit loan agreement we signed with the Export-Import Bank of China for $400 million, which was followed by the Cooperation Framework Agreement we signed in March this year with China Development Bank. Furthermore, within the Belt and Road Forum taking place in May 2017 in China, we signed a framework agreement of cooperation with Sinasure. At this point, please let me also mention the one for $200 million, which was recently signed between our subsidiary, Türkiye Sanayi Kalkınma Bankası and Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Thanks to all these, we not only contribute to the development of mutual economic business between our countries, but also reinforce the role we, as İşbank, play as a bridge between China and Turkey further. Let me move on to another topic, which we also attach great importance. This is our collaboration in payment systems. Union Pay cards, which have a global issuance of more than 7 billion, it's amazing, in 48 countries, have been accepted at our ATMs since 2014. In our online channels since May 2015, and our physical POS terminals since January 2016. We are the only bank in Turkey which accepts Union Pay cards through its online payment gateway. In 2018, we put Alipay and WeChatPay, both of which are among the local payment systems in China, enjoying a remarkable volume at the disposal of our customers who sell their products and services online. Last but not least, I briefly would like to mention fintech as well. As known, China is a leading nation with regard to high technology production. To be able to tap this know-how and observe the latest trends along with the speed of technological adaptation in the domestic market, we decided to set up an innovation center in China through our subsidiary Softec, the biggest software company in Turkey. This innovation center will be the second one. Following the one we had already opened up in Silicon Valley. We will open up our innovation center in China on October this year, 29. To conclude, I can gladly tell you that as Turkey İşbank, we are determined to maintain the dynamism we achieved to improve the contribution of the cooperation and synergy to our businesses, both sustainably and in a win-and-win manner, as well to engage actively in Belt and Road Initiative. I think this is a brief introduction, and I will come to the question. I will answer. Sorry, taking
that would be
risk.
appreciated. Thank you.
As you know, Turkey is an emerging country with a young population. Each year, there are hundreds of thousands of people joining the ranks of workforce, which puts our economy under pressure to create additional jobs in a continuous manner. Considering the level of automation, digitization, Industry 4, and Internet of Things, creation of additional jobs is becoming more difficult than ever, actually not only for economy, but worldwide. To this end, Belt and Road offers a great and very timely opportunity to match this demand with a supply of projects. The ongoing declared or unfinished project pipeline of mega projects ranging from roads to high-speed railways and from ports to energy projects to hospitals accumulated to around 350 billion. In a sense, capital markets and bank funding are not enough to meet the potential growth of the Turkish economy and these infrastructural needs. Hence, Turkey should expect from Belt and Road to fill the infrastructure financing gap for the benefit of both the improvement of the regional trade and the immersion of the prospective Turkish market in a mutual win-and-win structure. Thank you.
So we're expecting 350 billion, that's what you said. In liras or dollars? 350 billion.
350 in, I think, dollars.
Dollars. Excellent. All right. That's our expectation from Belt and Road for this country. Perfect. So if I would switch to our colleague from Euler Hermes, where do you see the financial risks in Belt and Road? How do you monitor them? And how do you plan to facilitate these by ensuring these risks? Help us understand that.
First, before looking at Belt and Road initiative as a source of risk, I would like to underline the fact that that's a good way to get an exposure to Belt and Road initiative to diversify the risk. So I would like to do the way that the fact that we are now at a global level in a context where uncertainty and the source of risk coming from the US in particular are pretty high. So investing and getting an exposure to Belt and Road initiative is probably the best way to bet on regionalization of trades. And it will be very important to be smart in the future to avoid the kind of tariff war which will exist between the big blocks at a global level. So regionalization is the future of trade, and therefore Belt and Road initiative is very promising. So instead of looking at the Belt and Road initiative as a new source of risk, I would like the fact that's a good way to diversify the risk for investor and for real exporter. Then to answer more directly to your question on how to deal with the risk for Belt and Road initiative, I would first mention the fact that if you want to invest or get any kind of exposure to Belt and Road initiative, you need to first know pretty well the Chinese economy. So that's why you need to be located over there, to have some plant, to have some knowledge, to have some insurance, to be in contact with companies such as ELRMS, which allows you to collect the data and know the way the people in China are thinking. So I spent 8 years in China, and I consider that if you don't go over there, if you don't have a long-term presence over there, you won't be capable of understanding what is their strategy, what are their intentions. So you need to spend some time and understand what are their strategy. And regarding the risk which are underlying the Chinese economy, of course, you need to be aware that the level of debt of the corporate sector is at 160% of GDP, that the total level of debt of this economy is at 260% of GDP. So there are some risks, there are some issues related to overcapacities, there are some risks related to the protection of intellectual property. So you need, of course, to have a very in-depth knowledge of this economy, and you have to anticipate the economic policy orientation of this economy to have a very good understanding of the risk coming from China. Then you have to look at the destination countries, with the countries which will benefit from infrastructure projects, from exchange with China. And to this regard, of course, this is very good to receive a lot of investment from China, a lot of funding. But at the same time, so we have identified a few countries which are already at a certain level of public debt. And that sustainability of the destination countries will be very important to look at. If we consider that there are between 60 and 80 countries already benefiting from the direct investment from China, this is common amongst economists to identify at least 23 countries which are already problematical in terms of sustainability of the debt, and 8 of them being in a difficult situation. So if you have an exposure to that, you need to understand also that destination country will be key, and that's why we at ELRMS, we insist on being present in each of these countries and everywhere in the world to have a better understanding of the risk. Of course, there is the political risk dimension. So we have seen China, we have seen destination country, and then there is the global aspect or the interconnection aspect of these things. And to this regard, I would like the fact that many projects will be related to infrastructure, and so many aspects will be related to environment. And so the other risk that I would like is the kind of environment risk. There is other aspect of risk, such as the diversity of a regulatory system, and but that's pretty all what we have. So again, I will insist on the needs and the necessity to be present at a local level in destination country and in China to really anticipate and know what is happening beside this infrastructure project and these trade flows.
Thank you. So you consider the Belt and Road Initiative a pathway for Turkey to regionalize its prominence and reduce its country risk, actually, which is interesting. And also you mentioned that we need to understand our counterparts in China better, as well as their monetary policy. It's going to influence things moving forward. Interesting. Thank you. Now, if you move to Emre Bey, you know, in the past couple of years, actually in a decade, the PPPs have been dominated by the Turkish sponsors, and there has been some interest in, from the foreign funds to invest in this, but it has not been as attractive as the country likes. How do we attract the foreign investors, investment banks, infrastructure funds into Belt and Road Initiative? And what are we missing here? What are we missing, and what shall we be working on?
Well, thank you very much, first of all. On behalf of Garanti Bank, I would like to thank TÜSİAD and CFI for this important summit, and I am honored to participate here. Well, you are right that, you know, until now, most of the PPP projects in Turkey have been dominated by the local players. To give some numbers, you know, over the last 10 years in Turkey, $40 billion of investment has been realized in the PPP side. $25 billion motorways, and roughly $15 billion hospital PPPs. This is the overall investment in the PPPs. And the share of foreign investors is only 20%. So it's very, very low. So I think we have to increase that level. Of course, there are many ways to do that, but I can name some of them. The first one, I think, could be introducing new vehicles for especially attracting big infrastructure funds. You know, we are taking a very low share from infrastructure funds. You know, those funds can directly invest in the projects. That's, you know, number one maybe option. But another option would be those funds could invest in local funds so that they can indirectly invest the PPPs. Well, fortunately, there has been a new regulation change in Turkey. So currently, an infrastructure fund or a private equity investment fund can be established here in Turkey with the help of CMB. And now there are also, you know, significant tax incentives for the investors. So the infra fund can invest through that local fund and enjoy the PPP income. There is a good example in the market. You know, an asset management company in Turkey very recently launched a private equity investment fund, and they raised the funding, you know, mainly from international investors, international funds, and the proceeds were used in a hospital PPP project. That was a real example. I think the same mechanism could be applied for the, you know, upcoming projects. Which will help us. I think another important issue that we have to mention is the involvement of the Turkish Wealth Fund. You know, I personally believe that Turkish Wealth Fund can play an important role in the PPPs. So Turkish Wealth Fund can be a catalyzer, you know, in maybe taking minority stakes in some projects. And then the other, you know, sovereign wealth funds in other countries' wealth funds can also maybe participate in the project, because the participation of Turkish wealth funds will increase the credibility of the project. We can use this mechanism more and more, especially in mega projects. And looking to the financing side or the debt side, I think we should be using more and more the project bonds. You know, in Turkey, Turkish banks, we are facing, of course, maturity mismatch, because we are facing long-term loans with short-term deposits. So maturity is a concern for us. So what we can do in the future, if there is a construction requirement, the local banks can finance the construction. And then once it's completed, the financing can be refinanced by a project bond. And the project bond can be issued by the project company. investors can be found from international markets, so that there will be new liquidity injection to the system, and the risks can be transferred to the bond owners, where they will enjoy the cash flow. It will be a yield-co structure. There is an example in Turkish market, which was Mersinport. Mersinport was privatized in 2007, and at that time, a club of 6 banks, including Garanti Bank, financed the acquisition of the project, and also there was an investment requirement. After the investment has been completed, what happened? The loan was taken out by a project bond, and it was a very successful, I think, issuance at that time with a sizable ticket. So similar examples could be introduced, I think, in the PPPs. This will help us significantly. Maybe as a last point, I can mention that I think we are missing the publicity part. Because looking to the history, Turkey has a very strong, actually, success story in the PPP side. Again, giving the numbers, in the last 30 years in Turkey, 125 PPP projects had been achieved with a size of $135 billion. And comparing the PPP projects with the European Union ones, we see that the projects in Turkey were completed on time, within budget, without major construction issues, and also operation-wise, also there is a strong experience. So I can say that we can show this, success to the investors, to foreign investors, by way of making some road shows, I don't know, publicizing those, success, so that we can attract more and more investors to Turkey. Thank you.
Yes, I would agree that, as far as project management, Turkish construction companies are doing quite well. We've been well ahead of schedule in a number of projects compared to the peers. And the project bond is also an interesting phenomenon. It will definitely help us flush and reuse the capital of our financial system. That's definitely a plus. Now I would like to switch to Mr. Rıza Kadılar. He has a dual role on the financing side and China Institute of Turkey on both the funding side as well as the relations side. We mentioned about the financial instruments we can use on this Belt and Road Initiative. Any further ideas around that, such as the project bond? And I would like to add another question on this one. In your other role as China Institute of Turkey, I personally have been observing a lot of cultural barriers of facilitating deals and trade between China and Turkey. What are your suggestions, and how can the financial institutions facilitate overcoming these cultural barriers?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the organizers. Proud of being a part of TÜSİAD, hosting this organization here, because I truly believe this is so important. Let me underline a fact. Maybe it was mentioned yesterday, but I should emphasize again today. Belt and Road is not a bridge project. It's not just an infrastructure project. It's maybe the largest ever peace project, regional development project. Maybe it's because European Union, maybe even much bigger. When the dream is there, we'll be seeing peace and harmony in a huge part of the world. So this is a big dream, this is a big project. So it's not just Turkey and China, it's so many countries put together. Not only infrastructure, but also we're talking about technology, human capital, culture, everything. So it's a huge initiative. So we are so proud of being a part of this initiative. Culture. Yeah, unfortunately, when I look from the Turkish angle, as far as I know, Istanbul is the largest 21st city in the world. And all of the larger cities, either they are Chinese cities or all of them have a Chinatown. In Istanbul, we don't have a Chinatown. You go in February, March to any airport in the world, I exaggerate, but let's say in Europe, in US, there is some sort of a reference for Chinese New Year. What do we have here? I'm invited from time to time to some companies to talk about China, Chinese cultures and everything. We don't even have the very basics of understanding of the Chinese culture. There's an old saying that I keep on repeating every occasion. There's a wonderful old saying, a Chinese saying. They say, we are not friends because we do business together. We do business together because we are friends. You first develop the relationship, first you develop the mutual understanding, then comes the business. On the business side, we got involved as a bank to some Belt and Road related initiatives. I can maybe mention the last one, the big project, the Çanakkale Bridge. Most of those initiatives today are infrastructure initiatives, and it requires a great understanding between the countries. It's G to G type of end. Our role in this project was, as a French bank, we did coordinate the Korean Exim site. Korea and Chinese banks were so present, local banks, Turkish banks, for sponsors. So when the project is there, when there's a strong will between the governments there, for banks, it's relatively easy. But in order to reach this goal in the whole region, yes, I do appreciate the previous panel. The legal infrastructure is important. The basic legal understanding of each countries. We can't really rely on the English law to sort out all the problems. We need to harmonize the legal infrastructure in those countries as well. And, to follow some advice going forward, I totally agree with Alexis. We need to follow China. We need to understand those countries. And unfortunately, as Turkey, our capabilities of generating information, first-hand information in that part of the world is limited. So we need to develop more and more cooperation with multinationals, with professional service providers, with insurance companies, with international banks, with law firms, whatever, in order to better understand, assess the risks involved. The second thing, I just noticed that we are just looking as a kind of, host country, what we can get out of this initiative. We are just here to seek investment, to seek finance, to seek, corporations. But we need to think about what we have to offer. It's a regional development. Turkey needs to also put something on the table to play a role. So when we look to different corridors, north, south, the Maritimes, to be frank, we are not in the best position today. We need to improve a lot our understanding and our contribution to this big project. And the third thing to finish, maybe the biggest opportunities lies not in Turkey, but maybe in the region. There are over 50 countries, 20 of them are in trouble, whatever. And Turkish companies, Turkish entrepreneurs, Turkish banks, we should be ready, and we are ready to undertake important projects in those countries as well. Let's not forget, for example, the construction sector in Turkey. We have already a proven success in this geography. Our logistics sector have a proven success in this geography. So why don't we brave enough to develop good relations with other partners, to start with Chinese, but also with other players in the region, to play a more active role, not only in this geography, but in the whole geography. So I would say the first thing is culture. We need to get to know each other very well. The second thing is, today the governments play a very important role in this part of the world. And the third thing, Turkey should be also prepared to offer, to be ready what to offer, not only here, but also in the countries as well. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. So we need to understand our counterpart more effectively and understand what is in it for them as well as what's in it for us. So if I would switch to Ms. Zhipeng on the notion of trade today and how it will change over time. And there is a lot of rhetoric around the trade wars globally. So help us understand how China is adapting to the policies, monetary policies of this trade war talk, and the use of RMB is progressing. And also, if you could add on, adding back to Rıza Bey's words on how Turkey stacks up vis-a-vis the other regional hubs or regional cooperation counterparties China has in as far as investment climate and as well as technology? I know that you have a technology role in your day-to-day role as well. So help us understand that, how China is evolving as far as policy is concerned, and where does Turkey stand as far as the other potential areas of investment in technology and investment climate?
Thank you. Well, I will say a couple of words about my organization because to help on that, answer the questions. Actually, there are two unique characteristics of our organization. We call us Tsinghua Asset Management Group. Actually, Tsinghua is from the Tsinghua University, is one of the Chinese leading university, and all the Tsinghua's, we say, commercial assets. In other words, it's Tsinghua spin-offs are all under the management of the Tsinghua Holdings umbrella. So our organization, Tsinghua Asset Management, actually is the Tsinghua Holdings, we say financial services and financial assets, the platform. So we have two businesses now. We have equity investments, and also we have traditional financial services. We involve in setting up like the life insurance company, leasing, all of the things. But all my goals, our goals is investing to technology, also helping the technology transfer from the university and broadly helping technology transfer more with our partners. Another unique thing is where we are. We are in the Zhongguancun area. As I think you find it difficult to pronounce the name, actually.
I tried.
Yeah. You say it very perfectly, actually. Zhongguancun is China's Silicon Valley, very similar to Silicon Valley in terms of here there's quite a lot of very good universities similar to Silicon Valley. Here there's a lot of very good startups, lots of very famous kind of venture firms, all based in Zhongguancun area. And also we do have over 300 public companies. Majority are all kind of technology public companies. I think majority are private enterprise. Some percentage are state-owned. So this is a kind of a very unique area here. So back to your questions is kind of we think we are very actively invest globally because we are linked to the university. For example, for maybe the first stage is we do some globalization of our academia. We invite the students coming to the university. For example, I'm also a lecturer for the master courses in the Tsinghua University. All the students coming from globally. Also, we set up a research and applied research institute. We set up our South Asia Center in Indonesia. We have another global innovation exchange in Seattle. Unfortunately, also we have another one in Israel. Unfortunately, we don't have presence here in Turkey. So this kind of we do reply. Furthermore, we working with local partners to set up, we say, incubators. Incubators like incubate. We have a global incubator networks. The first incubator is just outside our campus. It's not just incubate startups, but also we could say incubate the multinationals coming to China. If looking back 20 years ago, lots of multinationals set up their R&D just outside our campus because they want to easily access talents. So another step, but furthermore, that is we set up venture funds or private equity funds working closely with local partners. For example, we have venture funds based in Silicon Valley. That's because we have lots of alumni here. We already have some successful individual investment there, but later we set up a venture funds based in Silicon Valley. And then at the same time, we also have equity funds in Europe, focusing on investing to, we say, growth stage deals, because if you look at some company, they have a proven technology, they have a proven business model, and we are not only provide capital, but also we provide their access to the China market, helping them to set up presence in China. So for the currencies, so normally actually currently. To be honest, we do have some currency, for currency exchange difficulties. But for our fund, because we have for our fund, for the Silicon Valley Fund, that's definitely the local currency. So we do global things in the local way. So our Silicon Valley Fund is in the U.S. currency. Our European funds actually is a by currency. We have the Chinese. It's working in the parallel. So that's from the very practical way. But at the same time, because I'm also working in the Zhongguancun area, actually we are working very closely with the central government and all local governments, trying to help the company in our region to easily to get the capital to do overseas investment. So we launched some kind of initiatives to helping our private enterprises to get more capital from the Chinese banks domestically, and their overseas branches. And also back to the mention about the war between China and some of things. It's interesting because we just because for the current things between China and the U.S. is more on the trading things, on the semiconductor, on the the other kind of consumer products. Mm-hmm. But for the Zhongguancun area, we do have some kind of influence on that. But majority of our Zhongguancun companies very much have their core technologies. So in a very positive way, this very much give us some opportunities. Of course, one of them is we can, our lots of Chinese technologies, they can sell their technology. They can sell their technology products. They have, previously they sourcing maybe they sourcing U.S. but now, well, they can have the opportunities. The other things, we turn our eyes to Europe. For example, we see lots of, I have done some research on the area. So we have been seeing in the Belt and Road regions, countries, for this year, from the January to September, we have done, for the public company in the Zhongguancun area, we already have done 2 merger and acquisition deals. One is happened to the Bulgaria. A Chinese public company acquired a Bulgaria technology company. That company doing imaging and vision things. So it's a very much technology company. The other one is happened to Poland. It's a Chinese Chinese public company acquired Poland. I think it's Poland #1. The concentrated apple juice company. So that's helping the Chinese company to have a global presence, setting up the global presence. So I would say there's a very kind of a positive things about something happened, the problem with the U.S., but we do kind of more and more things more closely with European countries, definitely with the Belt and Road countries. Thank you.
So it's more of an opportunity in this part of the world than a threat. Thank you. As we talk about the potential trade wars and what's happening among the continents, of course, the settlement of local currency trades is becoming more and more prevalent, and currency exchange in trade among the Belt and Road Initiative is taking more and more prominence. So if I would ask Mr. Cui here, what kind of actions are taken to enhance the coordination of settlement of local currency and currency exchange and investments among the Belt and Road Initiative routes and the countries that are associated with the initiative?
I think a short answer to your question is maybe to illustrate an example which I came across in Georgia. Okay, Huaning, which is a Chinese mainland company based in Xinjiang, they acquire a bank in Georgia. The name of the bank is Basis Bank in the year 2012. And the whole purpose, of course, is to grow renminbi cross-border settlement business between China and Georgia. But at the same time, I think the acquisition can also facilitate bilateral trade and investment and become, I would say, one of the leading cases of Chinese commercial banks, or not commercial bank, actually Hualing is a private enterprises, is a conglomerate, purchasing commercial banks abroad. Some examples that we have heard about include, say, for example, privatization projects in CSI, countries such as Belarus. At a more macro level, the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, has been in close cooperations with other international financial institutions like the World Bank, the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, as well as IMF, in coordinating not just investment projects along the Belt and Road, but more importantly, also cross-jurisdiction fiscal and monetary policies.
And you mentioned the AIIB. That's a rather new institution that's been established to foster the growth. And İşbank has been working with AIIB, as I understand. And infrastructure investments, of course, sustainability is a major issue globally right now, is also in this part of the world, as well as China, elsewhere, as well as Greater Europe. What's the aspect of sustainability in this financial markets in Belt and Road Initiative, and what can we expect, and how did this work with AIIB go? I'm wondering about this to attract funding into this country.
Thank you. Sustainability is the main and important issue in all over the world, I think, on all over the sectors. So it's possible and exactly the right time to rethink the Belt and Road projects, financing, and the markets from the sustainability angle for new and existing projects while enabling capital rising and investment environmental benefits such as energy efficiency, waste management, sustainable land use, smart cities, and clean transportation shall also be taken into consideration. Green sustainable bonds and green loans can be channeled to finance the basic infrastructure, socioeconomic advancement, food security, and employment generation. In China, PBOC and EIB launched an initiative to develop a framework for green financing. And Shenzhen and Luxembourg Stock Exchange jointly launched the China Green Bond Index in 2017. In conclusion, Turkey can work jointly with China to develop the Istanbul World Finance Center project to be more focused on sustainable financial markets. Furthermore, this will attract broader range of green investors to Turkey and to be potential Belt and Road projects in the middle corridor. On the other hand, diversifying the currencies that are used for Belt and Road trade and investments can be another focus, and providing RMB liquidity in Istanbul as well as the diverse green products will add more value for both the investors and borrowers. Lastly, if the regulators jointly work the incentives, the sustainable projects and Belt and Road financing, the expectations will become more concrete. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know, there's two parties that have a lot to share in common, and including the sustainability aspect, and also as they get to know each other more, of course, the perception of risk is somewhat high if you look at it from each other's point of view. So what will be the role of the insurance industry here to reduce that perception and take on the perceived risk away from this projects and funding, so things can move much more smoothly, and these projects are put in life?
There are many things to do for an insurer and for a global insurer like us in particular. The first thing is, like my neighbor was saying, this is to look at the reality of the trade and investment flows related to a Belt and Road initiative. And I would totally agree with the fact that this is not a one-way direction. And so we have calculated in earlier MS that actually Belt and Road initiative will produce more than 170 billion of export gains at the global level in 2018. It will create more than 110 billion of export gains in 2019. So the most reasonable things for a credit insurer like us is to, first of all, accompany exporters which have an exposure to Belt and Road initiative and protect the credit that they provide to their clients. The second thing, of course, is to look at the political risk and economic risk. So we have a lot of business units located everywhere in the world, and it allows us to create a unique databases of information on the micro risk and the macro risk. And at this level, I would insist on the fact that we need to both adopt a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach. Bottom-up approach, this is looking at the viability of an economic project. So you need to look into the detail of your client and to see what is the real risk exposure and if the economic project that you cover is viable in the long term. This is the bottom-up approach. The top-down approach is, of course, to identify the political risk and the global macro risk. And this is what we try to do in LRMS, in our research department. And of course, this micro level of risk and macro level of risk are interconnected. And so that's why we try to develop also a new system of analyzing the risk based on sentiment and the indicator, looking at text mining and looking at the circulation on the information at a global level, because you need to be very rapid. And so I guess that Belt and Road initiative will be at the forefront of this new way of transmission in the information. So that's why we develop a new way of analyzing the risk based on data mining. And the last aspect of the analysis of the risk related to Belt and Road initiative is to look after the development of, for example, infrastructure projects. What does it mean, this development? It means that supply chains at a global level, at a regional level in Asia and Europe and through Turkey, supply chain will be more and more integrated. So this is a new way of defining risk. This is not enough to look at the national situation or at the individual situation of a company. You need to think risk in terms of interconnection. So that's why we have also developed new ways of looking at the integration of a global supply chain. And when you have a very accurate and precise view of the interconnection of the supply chain, you will be able to identify the location of risk and how to manage this risk.
Okay. So you're mentioning if there's reliable data, available data that we can take a look at, that will definitely help us reduce the risk, and we will be more than willing to ensure that as long as there's reliable data. That's interesting. Okay. Emre Bey, as far as I know, you are involved very heavily on a number of projects on attracting foreign capital, foreign credit into this country. And what are the key risks that may shy away foreign credit from further involvement in PPP projects, and how do you see them being mitigated? I mean, Alexis has mentioned availability of data and insurance this project. What else is out there? What is preventing us from capturing a better share of this available credit out there?
Well, as far as our discussion is concerned with foreign investors, you know, they are raising many risks, of course, when they want to invest in Turkey. But let me just name some of them. One of the key risks that they are raising is the foreign currency risk in some PPP projects, especially in motorways. In the motorways, you know, the tariff is indexed to dollar, so they will have the dollar index tariff. That's a mitigant, but on the other hand, the tariff is converted to Turkish lira at the beginning of each year with the exchange rate as of first business day of each year. And the payment by the government, the revenue guarantee payment, is done in the April of next year. So there is a 16 months foreign currency risk exposed by the project, which can be mitigated by hedging, you know, forward hedgings or other type of hedgings, but there is a cost. And the cost is a function of, you know, difference between Turkish lira and dollar interest rates. You know, it was lower, you know, in the past, but currently that difference is to the north of 25%. So you can hedge that risk, but with a 25% cost, which is a huge cost right now, which reduces the debt levels, debt service cover ratio levels, and also requires more equity in the project, which reduces the equity income as well, IRRs. So it's, you know, prohibits the project being, you know, more bankable or more feasible. So what we can do, maybe we can have more frequent tariff indexation mechanisms, maybe quarterly, semi-annually, or more frequent, you know, government payments could be done to mitigate that risk. So that's number one risk raised by the foreign investors when we talk with them. The second one is that, you know, the concession periods, the duration of the concession period. So when you have a PPP, you have a concession for a limited period of time. You know, in the recent tenders, because of the huge competition, we see that the concession periods getting shorter and shorter. Then, you know, you don't have a sufficient buffer, you know, for material adverse changes. This could be, you know, delay in the construction. This could be, you know, any you know, payment delay, etc. These are the realities of the project. So you should have a sufficient tail period between the concession period and the loan maturity. In some projects, we don't have that. I mean, we have, I think, a good example here, which is the PPP projects, the hospital ones. In the hospital projects, the concession is fixed, duration is 25 years. So you know how long it will be. And the sponsor is bidding in the tender based on the rent, you know, payments to be done by the government. So the lowest rent wins in the hospitals. But since you have a 25-year concession, you can grant long-term loans, 15-year, 18-year, even 20-year maturities are available, which makes the project more feasible. But in the motorways, just the opposite. The government's guarantee revenue amount is fixed. The concession is bid. So the sponsor bids on the concession period. The shorter concession wins. In that type of project, then you have shorter concessions and exposed to certain risks. So what we recommend is that the motorway, the BOT motorway projects could be converted to, you know, PPP or hospital PPP type, where the concession is longer and fixed. Mm-hmm. This is, I think, very critical from a foreign investor perspective, but also from a lender perspective. Maybe the last point that I can mention is the environmental risks associated with the projects. You know, that creates reputation risks in some projects. Even if we, you know, apply international standards in our projects, equator principles, etc., from time to time we are exposed to, you know, resettlement, deforestation, or expropriation risks, especially in some mega projects, which could create some public reaction. That may shy away some foreign investors. So what can we do? We can, I think, allocate sufficient time and resource to due diligence of the environmental risks. We shouldn't see this as a time of loss because it could take months, even years to finalize the studies. But all the risks should be analyzed and mitigated so that the investors do not face in the future any reputation or even a financial risk caused by an environmental risk.
We talked quite a lot about, in these infrastructure projects, the involvement of the government. Of course, there's a lot of private capital globally as well. And Rıza Bey, maybe you can help us understand how the public and private finance will shape out the Belt and Road Initiative. Of course, China is a mixed government where there are some private enterprises, public enterprises. We are on this side, are more private enterprises ourselves. But where is the future for the Belt and Road Initiative as far as funding is concerned? How do you see the private finance playing a role here as far as facilitating these investments?
Depends on the type of the investment. For infrastructure projects, as I said, we truly believe the importance of the government presence and the will. Because, one of the affiliated companies we have is COFAS, and a part of it is Export Credit Agency. And lately, for example, I do receive some commercial attaches of the European countries like Spain, France, the Netherlands. They are coming to visit to ask what could be the role for the technology to be provided from Europe for this initiative. So the Belt and Road now started, for example, I do welcome Siemens as one of the sponsors here. So the technology element of those projects, wherever it comes, I think all countries are willing to put their efforts to also provide financing. So that's a key issue of which kind of projects and which kind of technology. For example, in the example I gave about this bridge, the Korean technology and Koreans came a very sizable and important part of the support. What we did in this project, for example, which is unique or maybe trailblazer in this country, we did mobilize non-bank financial institutions' savings to this project. So we act as the intermediary for Korean non-bank financial institutions to finance this project. In most of the big projects, in the telecom, for example, we do cooperate with Chinese Exim. So there is this element of the government involvement in those projects. The other part that we don't see yet much, maybe I'm missing, so please correct me if I'm wrong. For example, this new development bank, the BRICS bank, they are BRICS. But I don't know any Turkish company having any access to any project that bank has been financing, or this Asia infrastructure bank that's been established in Shanghai. Whether we have any projects that qualify for their criteria. So we need to look into those to find project bonds, yes, but we're talking a very difficult geography, and in this geography it could only be panda bond type of, element. A bit outside of Belt and Road, but Belt and Road being a conduit for dialogue, I think Turkey needs to issue bonds in renminbi. Because when we look to foreign trade deficit, yes, we do have a big foreign trade deficit with China, but it's okay that we have similar trade deficit with maybe some other countries, whatever. But currency deficit is amazing. So either Turkish banks or Turkish treasury or some of the big companies dealing with China should look into this opportunity. As China Institute Turkey, our very first activity years ago was when Turkish Central Bank and the People's Republic Bank of China has signed the swap agreement. It's been so long now. And since then, we haven't understand how it works. Has it ever been used? What's the exchange rate? How did it go? We asked opinion from all players, and we couldn't get any answer yet. So there are goodwill, there are willingness to use new finance opportunities, but other than this ECA and the government involvement, I haven't seen others to come through yet. But there are possibilities, and here we are to work on them.
So you're saying private finance basically can use its agility and creativity of matching the funds to the needs without committing its own capital in a large way, basically acting as an intermediary. And we need to think about our counterparts' needs. For example, their need to match the RMB and funding it through RMB bonds. That's a very good idea, actually. Yeah, very good idea. Ms. Ji Peng, if I would ask you about this Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which has been more and more prevalent these days, and its role in Belt and Road Initiative. Will it facilitate access to private funding? How is that going to help out the efforts in this part of the world?
Actually, we work closely. We have some of our merger acquisition deals actually working with the, as you guys mentioned about maybe, for example, China Import-Export Bank. Also, a few weeks ago, I talking with the Asia, not Infrastructure Bank, but Asia Development Bank, because I think they all have some assets, or they all want to have some technology strategy. So I would like to say we are the more focused on technology. We're not really very much directly involving in infrastructure development, but we provide technology. For example, a few years ago in the China high-speed railway projects, actually quite a few our portfolio companies actually provide their kind of technology parts on that, not only in the computer, in the control things, control components. So that's what we can contribute. And furthermore is looking, if we can say, if you're doing a lot of infrastructure work, you definitely need to, in the long run, you need to think about technology side, because if you're talking about technology, we're talking about innovation. So there are two ways for innovation. One is we call technology-driven. If we have a good technology and make some real things happen, really changing the world, changing life. But the other side, the other way is innovation is driven by the market's needs. So if we have some infrastructure work, or if have more things, we have maybe China and Turkey have more closely working together, we definitely can find maybe the market really needs some good technology to change or to improve the process, or improve the quality of the products, or have maybe in the long future we can incubate some really world-leading technology or world-leading products. At the same time, we can incubate some really world-leading technology company. Thank you.
So it basically would, through technology, facilitating these infrastructure investments through technology, that may be a nice outlet for us to tackle. Now, I do realize we are limiting our time, and we are standing in between your lunch break and this meeting. So I'd like to take some questions, if there are any questions, before we part for lunch. Any questions we can take for the audience, please? I guess the hunger level is very high at this moment at 12:15. Well, I wish all of us a great afternoon session. Thank you for helping us, and I hope that next year we will start celebrating Chinese New Year in Turkey. I'm not sure about how fast we can have Chinatown, but there is definitely a way for us to move forward. Thank you. Thank you all for participating.